Hello, everyone. We're here today to talk about openQA with three of my colleagues here from SUSE, who are much more proficient than myself with openQA itself. I'm really happy to have here today Dan Cermak, Santiago Zarate, and Oliver Kurz with me, who will be helping me to understand a little bit of the details of openQA. So without further ado, I would like you guys to introduce yourself, let us know who you are and what you do, and then we start. So, Oliver, could you please introduce yourself?
Of course, thank you. Hi, I'm Oliver. I'm one of the lead openQA developers, and I'm part of leading the main development of openQA itself. By that, we are also supporting our main users of who use tests, who write openQA tests, be it for Linux system distributions as well as applications. I'm also a supporter of the release process where we bind this testing tool into a bigger process, and we use openQA as a high-level CI system and tests Linux distributions, test new builds of these products before they are released.
Thank you, Oliver. Santiago, I may come to you now.
Hi, I am Santiago Zarate. I am one of the Scrum Masters for a virtual team, which is how we call ourselves. We are divided into several different teams, and we are taking care of different parts of the product. So for the most part, I'm just trying to make sure that all the work is streamlined and helping our test engineers to get those tests working as soon as possible so that we can make sure that the product is properly tested. And from time to time, I also contribute to the openQA backend and support on some infrastructure parts of our test infrastructure.
Thank you, Santiago. So you're really an end user of openQA. So it's going to be really important, your input here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Dan, what about yourself? Well, everybody knows now Dan. We've done a few of this together. So tell us.
I'm Dan. I'm a software developer at SUSE, part of the developer engagement. openQA is actually not really my main task. I'm mostly come into this as a user to test specific parts of the OpenSUSE distribution and also to test certain application and also vagrant boxes. So I'm your beginner user type person. I've never really contributed to openQA itself, but mostly to the tests.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you, guys. So let's get the ball rolling. I have a very simple question to start with and break the ice. What is openQA? I would like to understand briefly what it is, where is it applicable, and where does it really get hot, and why is it so cool? So who's going to start?
Yeah. Well, openQA is a testing tool, and that is used for system-level testing, especially used for testing complete operating systems. It is used for various Linux distributions, as well as bigger software stacks where multiple components come together. The great example, which I think, is that, well, openQA is used to test itself. So there's an openQA and openQA tests itself. It is doing that by using automated test scripts from a high-level user perspective. Think of a human tester that would test an application, and that can be a graphical application, that can also be a service, that can even include something like multiple machines. And what is done there is that we test by looking at the system under test from a very high level, system level perspective, and we do what a user would do. And that is an interface where we don't want to have something like a special test harness, which is application or component specific, but something really abstract, the interface of a normal computer, something like a keyboard, a mouse, and a screen. This is what we use. So what we do is, well, we ask openQA to press keys, to move the mouse, to click somewhere, to take a look on the screen, and it's comparing screen against references. It can be used for graphical testing, but it can also be used for low-level testing. Dan, I'm interested, how do you see that? Where do you think openQA is good at? Oops, I'm missing your audio here.
Oh, sorry. My audio went haywire
Much
there.
better.
So openQA is, in my opinion, it shines, as you already said, at automating these mundane tasks that are like installation procedures. So I know OpenSUSE does that. I know Fedora does that. Essentially testing that every new snapshot that the installer works, since that's a really boring task to test. You just fire up the installer, you click next, 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 and you wait half an hour. And I mean, no one wants to do that every single day or twice a day. And so openQA is really great in that regard. But it can test your higher level application. It can test appliances, but what's also pretty neat, although that's a little bit more involved to set up, is, for instance, to test on actual bare metal. So what might have been a little unclear is that in most cases, openQA starts the virtual machines and runs the tests inside the virtual machine, but it can actually even run on bare metal. Although as I said, it's a little bit more involved, but I'd say it mostly shines in testing and doing automated testing that can be mundane for a human tester.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Oliver. I think this gives a fair understanding of what openQA is. Now, because I am also pretty much a beginner for openQA, I have a second question, which is a simple one. But Oliver, I won't be asking that to you. I'm asking that to Santiago and Dan, who probably have a different experience. Let's say I am a beginner, and I really am. So where shall I start from? How do I start with openQA?
So it really depends on your use case. The easiest way to get started is to head to, for instance, openQA, OpenSUSE.org, take a look at how the tests are being executed. And from there, you will find easily the link to get to our GitHub repo. All of the tests that we are developing for openQA are public, so they are open source. And this is the same test code that we use for our internal product. So /. You need to get a little bit more familiar with the domain-specific language that we use. So how to be able to send Control-D when you are in a console, how to select the next graphical console. But there is some good documentation in open.qa. So you just type that in your browser, and there will be a link to the documentation where you can get where you can get acquainted with the test API. And also there is a very nice document on how to get started. That's one way. Dan?
Thank you.
Yeah, so as with contributing to essentially any kind of open source, it's, in my opinion, most important thing is find an itch to scratch for yourself. So find something that, for instance, if you have a package manager, a package maintainer, and you maintain a piece of software, and you notice that there's a whole bunch of manual steps that you should actually go through on every new release to check if the thing really works, and you find it breaking over and over again, that would be a point where you could start thinking about introducing openQA. And then it really depends on what exactly you want to do, if it's really feasible to do. In often it is, but for instance, you won't be testing Minecraft with openQA. That's probably not going to work really well. Although it might. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's just going to be a bit more work. So I'd say find an itch to scratch, search for stuff that looks comparable, and if you want places to start out, openQA documentation, and we also have on the openSUSE YouTube channel, there's also a few live streams that should get you started if you have a bit of time to just play them on the second screen or something like that.
Okay, so really the answer is get my hands dirty, right? Good.
Yeah.
Great. That's what I wanted to hear. So now let's assume I have a test case that I want to improve and fix, or either improve or fix. How do I approach that?
Yeah, so usually if you take a look at failing tests, what often happens is a so-called needle mismatch. So what openQA most often does is it takes your video output from your virtual machine, and then it looks for so-called needles, and then given this old searching for the needle in the haystack saying, it looks for parts of the screen to match a certain predefined image. And the thing is, tests from time to time, they start failing because, for instance, your program changes a certain graphic and you're searching for that graphic. And finding this stuff out is, fixing this stuff is usually not too hard. There's a special mode in the web interface of openQA, and I'd recommend to just if you just want to fix these kinds of failures, it's really trivial. You just watch one of those introductory YouTube videos that you find on YouTube, for instance, and that will show you how to do that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Santiago, would you like to add anything upon this?
Yeah. In case that you want to start to really get your hands even more dirtier, on top of creating an account inside the openQA instance, you can use your openSUSE ID for this. You can definitely start to take a look at the source code, and from there on, you can find where possibly a test is failing. So if it's, for instance, not a needle that is, if it's not a needle match, but it's rather a command, some application got updated and you see that, hey, I cannot recognize this command anymore. Then you know 90% of where the problem is. All you have to do is go to the GitHub project, take a look at the source code, modify that line, add a new test, or even just adapt it. And we have some features that help us with the test development. So you can always call this openQA custom Git ref spec. It's quite a long name, but it's very useful because you can take your branch, you can take a job, which is the failing one, and from there you can trigger a new job that is going to basically test the code that you just changed. And this is how you start to get your hands very, very dirty. And it can get dirty very fast.
Thank you. Thank you very much, both of you guys. Now, a little bit maybe more cumbersome question, and it comes down to the fact that the openQA is obviously open source, right? But I would like to understand what is the difference, if any, when it comes down to run openQA for an enterprise? Basically, I'm wondering what's the difference between the public openSUSE openQA and the version that we actually run at SUSE? Is that the same? How do they differentiate, and to what extent? Oliver, maybe you can give us a little bit of a hint.
Sure. First, running an openQA server is meant to be really easy and trivial. We recommend that to users and contributors to openQA tests to also run their own openQA instance. What we as a openQA development team maintain are the public instance openQA openSUSE.org on one hand. This is the one where everybody can see the test, everybody can take a look on what is currently tested for openSUSE, can see how openQA works like. You can watch the videos of the test recordings. You can click on the test definitions, which lead you to the corresponding source code or the GitHub repository. And it's tailored towards openSUSE distribution and all the adjacent products. That's like live CDs and different architectures, openSUSE Tumbleweed, openSUSE Leap, and more. There's a second instance, which is SUSE internal. And that one we also maintain. And that one is used mainly for SLE development, so corresponding to the openSUSE Linux distribution system level testing. We do the same for internal builds of whatever is the next version of SLE, which is short for SUSE Linux Enterprise, which again unfolds as a very big product tree. So there's a server installation, there's desktop, there is something like multiple machines of all different systems. And we also maintain that instance. It's bigger than the openSUSE instance. So that's interesting to us to say, well, we scale up, because we have this higher demands for that enterprise level testing. And it also has some other interesting aspects. So, and maybe Santi, I can hand over to you. What do you think? What is like also different for the internal instance?
So one of the main differences that we have between openQA that is running on openSUSE and the internal instance is that we run a little bit of more exotic backends. It's not that this is code that is hidden somewhere. It's just the code is there. It's just that for the internal instance, there is a little bit more hardware available. That means that we can run jobs on set system, so namely S390. We are also using Power VM. We have a couple of machines there that are doing a very good job into allowing us to see how bare metal installations on ARM systems are working, or for also S390 systems, for instance. So it's just a little bit of broader architecture selection, so to say. And of course, this testing also benefits to some extent openSUSE, for instance, because as we know, part of the Leap development comes from SLE. So there is a mutual benefit there as well.
Thank you. Now, because with Dan, we're actually working on what we call the developer program here at SUSE. I'm very much interested in developers and in developing software. So let's imagine that I'm developing my new shiny piece of software and somebody else obviously broke it, not me. So how, I mean, I would like to understand if the test is failing now, how do I go about this? I would like to understand a little bit of the workflow, let's call it the pipeline of events that can help me as a C developer to appreciate how to fix an openQA test. Santiago,
Santi,
maybe?
you want to go for? Yeah.
So we have something called the developer mode, for instance, where you can start to investigate a little bit and go into detail on what is going on under the hood of a system when you have a test that is actually failing. You basically can do this mostly on QEMU backends. And if you want, for instance, if say that you want to connect to the system under test with a VNC, with a VNC viewer, openQA will allow you to stop the test at a certain point, allow you to enter into this system under test, and from there on you have full control of the machine. So you can do some changes. You can do you can adapt the system so that it behaves on what the test flow is going to expect. And then you can tell openQA, okay, now resume the test. Or if you have to change some test code, you just simply tell openQA to stop and restart the test. That's one way on how it could go.
There are more tools available to help. So this developer mode is kind of a debugger. You can step through tests. You can interact with that system live while it is going on. There are more vectors to address the problem of what is going on, why is it failing now, since when is this failing, to answer these usual questions. So there is an investigation source for more information where you can find out, like, since when this is failing, what changed, compare the last good job.
I think we lost Oliver.
We lost him.
We lost Oliver.
Yes.
Oh no.
I think we did.
Well, that's okay. Maybe
Let's
we
try the
can.
Mississippi, a second Mississippi, a third Mississippi. Oh well.
Well, maybe let's wait for him to join again. But by the time being, we can move on. I think, because I would like to ask you something else as well. Maybe when Oliver comes back, he can continue.
Yeah, I can continue afterwards. Go on with the next step. Yeah.
How about, so Oliver, you're there?
Yeah. I would give it another try if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
Right. So investigation information is there. We can find out what was the last good test that still worked. What changed since then in all different kind of sources for changes. Being maybe the product changed, it's behaving differently now. Maybe the test code changed. Maybe that had been done by another person. Maybe there are new needles. Maybe this is running on a completely different machine, and the machine might have some weird impact. Maybe it's slower, maybe it's having a bad day, all these different things. There's also something like a trail of events. So there are logs where we can find out what entity did what changes. Maybe another user triggered a testing before, and now you're interacting with that. And so all this is making the life easier. And especially we have all these requirements over the last years of scaling up the system, and that includes also like just number of people that interact with the system. So it's really important to coordinate the efforts, because the test is failing. How do we ensure that there's, like, let's say, a single person looking at that and then pointing to the other person who can go on and help with that? So there's some kind of review workflow, and all this kind is supported in openQA. So you can put a label on a test and say, I know why this is failing, I will take care. Maybe there's a bug report which you can link. Santi?
Yeah. Now that you mentioned this part of the review, one of the advantages that we have is that there is a dashboard per call it job group. So you have a number of test suites that are running at the same time, and in this dashboard you can see those jobs running on different architectures. So if there is one failing on one part, but all the others are passing, you can see maybe there is definitely something. And then when you start exploring the job, you have all this investigation part, and on top of that, you have logs available that are usually collected by the test runner. So it makes much easier all this detection of, hey, what is happening here?
Okay. You said something quite interesting to me because you mentioned QEMU, right? But now let's imagine that I am a kernel developer or an hypervisor developer, and now I need to do some testing on my new shiny PCI pass-through mode or anything that is pass-through, and that could have some hiccups, right, with QEMU. How do you actually work with that? I don't know, Santiago, maybe you can help me?
Yeah, so if it's, so let's say you got this super new shiny machine, it's amazing, it's powerful machine. You can actually tell openQA, hey, there is a new machine over there. I want you to connect to it over an IPMI interface. This is the username, this is the password, and I want you to install this ISO on that machine. So openQA will take care of booting up that machine, making sure that it boots from the network. For instance, this is one of the ways you would boot it from the network, tell the bootloader, hey, this is the ISO that we want to start with, and I want to start an installation there. And from there on, if you want to deploy a full Zen cluster on this shiny new server, openQA will take care of it. You might have some hiccups here and there because technology is technology after all, but it will take care of it with no troubles.
Thanks, Santiago.
Sorry, one last thing. We even do that for power machines, for Power 9 machines. We are doing LPAR installations there. So we are telling openQA, hey, this is the control console. Connect to it. Please spawn a new LPAR for me, and I want this version of the operating system installed. And from there on, it's just the same testing, these mundane tasks that Dan was talking about.
Sounds good. Thank you. So another question. Let's say, like, we have obviously been speaking about distribution level testing and the overall operating system testing. But let's say that I'm not an operating system guy, but maybe I'm writing an application, and now this application gets deployed into an appliance, which could be a VM. So I don't really have necessarily the need to test all the little components, but I have this gigantic monolithic appliance that is moving along. Can I still test it with openQA?
I mean, of course you can. You can test essentially. Well, you don't necessarily have to start with something like an ISO image, or you can start with if you have an appliance, you can start out with your appliance and test just application specific parts. So for instance, if you're not interested in installers at all because there is none, then just tell openQA boot into this thing, and then check if my appliance actually does its job as you would otherwise. If you are only interested in testing a certain application, there's nothing really stopping you from just booting a OpenSUSE or any other distribution that is applicable to your openQA instance, booting up an ISO and just installing it from the repositories. So, for instance, I do that with RStudio. We packaged it, and we have a bunch of openQA tests for that, since on every update, I don't want to click through every menu and find out if more or less the usual stuff still works. So we use openQA for that. And for that, we just boot the latest snapshot, install RStudio, and run all the tests there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
To share some more examples, we have originally mentioned openQA in openQA tests. What we do there is we take an existing OpenSUSE installation as a base. We boot that in a VM, and then we install openQA, and we access that over the browser which we have within that VM. So, you know, the user experience of how you would interact with the web UI. There are other products which are also appliances. For example, the Open Build Service, also one important product that we interface with, is also providing an appliance. That appliance is also tested in openQA. It's, of course, not the only test for the Open Build Service. It's just yet another approach to give a little bit more test coverage to one of these products. And I think it's really also a good example because it's doing very little, but the most important thing of how you interact with an appliance. That is, you boot up some machine, and then you expect what the machine is doing on that high level, right? And this is where openQA can really help to test your appliance, your operating system, your application stack, your cluster of machines which interact with it, all of that.
Cool. Sounds really cool. Thank you, guys. This was really awesome. You provided a really great insight into the openQA and an overview, which was really, really good. I'm just wondering, if I get stuck at some point, how do I get some help? Do we have like mailing lists, or can you help me with some inputs here?
Yeah, so first, as a reminder, had been already mentioned, it's good to say it again. URL is open.qa. That's the main go-to point that is providing documentation, that is providing a link to the OpenSUSE openQA instance, which also serves as a good example because you can see it in action, you can follow existing tests. It provides links to YouTube videos. It provides also the contact points, which we have. There is an IRC channel. And so, yeah, maybe Dan, you can say, where did you get help?
Yeah, so mostly I got help on IRC. So if you really got a hands-on issue, then I think the best place to hop on is to usually to hash OpenSUSE factory on irc.freenode, and hope and just ask, and usually you'll get a reply on work days. You'll usually get a pretty swift reply. If that doesn't work out, you can also try out the Fedora QA channel, where Adam Williamson can also usually help you. So Fedora is is also one of the big users of openQA. So there you also can get help. That would be my two go-to points.
Just to add 2 more cents there, there is also a Twitter account for openQA. It's called openQA HQ on Twitter. So you can also ask questions there, and maybe if you are getting stuck, we can help you a little bit.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much for your time today. It was really great. Now I know a little bit more about openQA, and maybe I can get my hands dirty for the joy of Dan. So thanks again. And,
thank you, Marco.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
My pleasure, really. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I hope that the guys that are listening to us will enjoy this conversation and will use openQA, and let us know what you think about openQA and your issues, troubles, or anything that you can come up with in terms of enhancements to openQA. Thanks a million. Talk to you soon. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.